Good evening. The Chancellor boosted public spending in the region today in his autumn statement. Overall, the message was tough, but he said money would be found for 3 key projects.
They're all investments aimed at creating jobs. Coventry is one of 10 cities to benefit from new super-fast broadband. In Staffordshire, improving the M6 between junctions 10A and 13 at Stafford will get a share of almost £100 million. And Smethwick has got the go-ahead for a new £370 million hospital.
And our health correspondent Michele Paduano has been investigating what the long-awaited hospital will mean for the Black Country.
These Nightingale wards at City Hospital in Birmingham were literally designed by Florence Nightingale. Controlling infections is now difficult and privacy is virtually non-existent. The hospital's chief executive says maintenance of these Dickensian buildings is expensive.
When the hospital would actually open, we're still looking at 5 to 6 years. That's the sort of timeline we're talking about, because we have to do the complex negotiations, and then it takes about 3 years physically to build such a big facility. And
this is part of the 50-acre site in Smethwick where the £370 million Midland Metropolitan Hospital will be built. The 670 beds will replace the 1,000 or so at City Hospital Birmingham and at the Trust's other hospital in Sandwell. They were supposed to start building here back in 2010, but even then there were concerns about affordability. Then the financial crisis hit. We had 2011 and 2012, and some people thought they would never get permission. But now that appears about to change. The hospital will be financed by a new system announced by the Chancellor called PF2. It involves private companies but with a public stake and more control.
Well, we have identified the hospital in Sandwell as a prime candidate for the new PF2.
Not everyone is happy. This pallet company is part of a huge industrial area being forced to sell.
We're in limbo. We can't move. We haven't got the money to move. If they want us to move, well, they've got to give us money to buy a property of a like for like. You know, you can't expect us to move and go to a smaller property.
Patients in Sandwell will have to travel further, but the council says the new hospital is needed.
I actually think that the people of Sandwell deserve something new and modern, and this will fulfil that criteria.
And tonight in Smethwick, they were delighted that they'd been chosen.
Smethwick, really, compared to other cities and towns, they haven't got really good health, stuff like that, so I think it's really good.
Something in Smethwick would be a very great help for the community.
In the years to come, these obsolete buildings could be consigned to history. Michele Paduano, BBC Midlands Today.
Well, the promise of a brand new hospital isn't the only eye-catching project outlined by the Chancellor at Westminster today. Our political editor Patrick Burns is there for us this evening. So Patrick, do these capital investment plans suggest that the Chancellor is actually turning away from Plan A, which is straightforward austerity, to try to kick-start the economy?
No, Mary, it's still Plan A. The Chancellor believes that to do otherwise would spook the markets, which would risk an even greater mess than we're in some extent already in. Freeing up £5 billion for the sort of capital investments you've been talking about there by cutting £5 billion from the current spending of central government departments. One thing it's also done, of course, is to free up some business-friendly measures like a tax holiday for firms in the hope that they can trigger some much-needed growth, and also cutting corporation tax. Let's talk to Adrian Bailey, who chairs the Commons Business Select Committee, and to Karen Lumley, who used to be a company secretary, now the Conservative MP for Redditch. It's not going to change the world, is it? Local firms are not going to trigger as much growth as the Chancellor hopes.
Well, I very much hope they are. I mean, since we came into government, we've already created 1.2 million new private sector jobs. That's just incredible, considering the situation across the whole of the G7. I think, you know, cutting corporation tax from 28 to 21% is amazing. That will make it the lowest across the country.
So, Adrian, it's very hard for you to oppose these measures, business-friendly as they are.
Some business measures are well worth introducing, but the basic problem is lack of demand in the economy, and these particular measures will do nothing to address that whatsoever. We've got this absurd situation where millionaires are getting a tax cut worth £107,000. Ordinary families will be £1,000 a year worse off as a result of the measures that have been introduced in the budget today. That's going to squeeze public expenditure even more, less demand for goods and services, and firms will not feel like investing.
Must leave it there. This is the point. Thank you both, where the number crunchers really get to work overnight and the story of the budget unfolds for the rest of the week. Back to you, Nick.
Patrick Burns at Westminster, many thanks.
Our business correspondent, Peter Plisner, is at Wedgwood Pottery in Staffordshire. Now, Peter, what do you make of this announcement of M6 improvements in the county? Long overdue?
Certainly is, Nick. The motorway is getting busier. Today, the Chancellor announced a £1 billion fund for several road schemes, including the M6 between junctions 10A and 13. They'll install something called Managed Motorways, which uses the hard shoulder and indeed controls the speed of traffic, similar to a scheme installed on the M42 and some parts of the M6, improves journey time reliability and reduces congestion. And of course, that is good for the region's commuters and indeed good for businesses. So what do businesses make of today's autumn statement? I'm joined with two people who have views. Anthony Jones from Wedgwood, just tell me, what did you make of the statement?
I think it was a clever budget. It was a budget that made a relatively small amount of money go a relatively long way. We welcome the sentiment of the budget. It did address some issues for exporters like us, but ultimately it didn't go far enough, and it wasn't really a good budget for Wedgwood.
Did it do anything for Wedgwood, for how you're sort of recovering from where you were a couple of years ago?
It did address a couple of the issues that we were looking to be addressed. It addressed the subject of energy. We were looking for energy market reform to stop penalise energy-intensive industries like ours. Unfortunately, it didn't go that far. It did look at gas power generation, which will obviously help in the long term. And it did address capital allowances, where it gives additional relief for investment in plant and machinery.
Anthony, many thanks. David Shepherd, you were on the programme last night looking for things like a holiday and stamp duty to help the construction industry. Was there anything in the budget for the construction industry?
Well, I noticed there's some commitment to provide funding for 120,000 extra homes. If that takes place, that should be beneficial.
What about your own business? You've got a small business. What about small businesses generally? Was there anything in there for them?
For small business in general, let's see the detail as we go forward. I suppose one thing that will help us all is the 3p fuel duty that's not going to take place in January.
David, many thanks. Well, let's leave the last word to one of the workers here. Lee, you're an artist here. Just tell me, what did you make of the autumn statement? How did it help you?
I'm glad he's froze the fuel duty for next year. The tax threshold's gone up a slight increase. Other than that, it doesn't really benefit me a lot.
Lee, many thanks. Well, a budget that was good for some, but probably didn't go far enough for others.
Peter, thank you. And you can read more about what the Chancellor's plans could mean here in the Midlands in our political editor Patrick Burns' blog.
Campaigners